Welcome to Speak Up. I'm Ryan, and today we're diving into a topic central to every English learner: achieving fluency. Fluency isn't just about speaking quickly or knowing lots of words. It's about communicating confidently and naturally in everyday life. This includes speaking, listening, reading, and writing without hesitation. Fluency matters because it builds confidence, opens doors for travel, careers, and relationships, and makes communication meaningful. But here's the key. Fluency isn't about speed. It's about comfort. It's when English feels natural, and you no longer have to think about every word or rule. Achieving fluency takes time, but with the right approach, you can accelerate the process. Let's clarify what fluency truly means. It's not just speaking fast or having a big vocabulary. It's using the language naturally and comfortably in real-life situations. True fluency integrates all four skills. Speaking fluently means expressing your ideas smoothly and confidently without frequent pauses. Listening fluently is understanding others without needing translations, even with fast speech or unfamiliar accents. Reading fluently involves understanding texts without stopping to look up every word. And writing fluently is expressing thoughts clearly and naturally without overthinking grammar or structure. For example, preparing for a job interview in English involves speaking confidently, listening to questions, reading about the company, and writing follow-up emails. Similarly, while traveling, fluency lets you navigate conversations, signs, and casual interactions with ease. Fluency isn't a finish line, it's a journey. Even native speakers continuously refine their skills. Every step you take brings you closer to using English effortlessly. So remember, fluency is about connecting all skills and practicing them together to communicate effectively in the real world. Let's dive deeper into actionable steps to achieve this. Fluency, as we discussed earlier, isn't just about speed or knowing countless words. It's about communicating naturally and effectively in a variety of situations. Fluency allows you to express yourself clearly and understand others effortlessly, no matter where you are or who you're speaking with. It's that confidence in using English that transforms the way you interact with the world. Fluency is a journey, something you build over time by practicing all four key skills together: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. The more consistent you are, the more fluent you'll become. Now, let's dive into the heart of today's discussion: the secret ingredient to achieving fluency faster and more effectively. Fluency is about mastering all the key skills in harmony, but what's the critical factor that so many learners miss? What's the key to unlocking fluent, confident communication in English? Here's the answer: context. Context is everything when it comes to truly mastering English. It's the key to understanding, using, and retaining the language in real-world situations. Without context, words and grammar rules are just pieces of a puzzle you can't put together. With context, everything clicks into place. So, what does context mean in language learning? It's about understanding how and why certain words, phrases, and grammar are used in different situations. It's about learning the nuances, the subtle differences in tone, formality, and meaning that make your English sound natural and appropriate. Context teaches you how to adjust your communication depending on the situation, whether it's casual, formal, professional, or personal. This is where many learners go wrong. They focus on memorizing vocabulary lists or drilling grammar rules, but forget that language doesn't exist in isolation. For example, think about how differently you'd speak to a close friend versus your boss. The words might be similar, but the tone, formality, and sentence structure change depending on who you're speaking to. That's context at work. Consider the simple phrase, "How are you?" It's a straightforward greeting, but its meaning can vary depending on the context. With a close friend, you might say, "Hey, how are you?" in a casual tone. In a business setting, you might say, "Good morning, how are you today?" with a more formal tone. The words are nearly the same, but the way you use them changes dramatically based on the situation. This is why learning words or grammar in isolation doesn't lead to fluency. Knowing the word doesn't mean you'll know when or how to use it. For instance, take the word cheers. In the UK, it means thank you in a casual way. But in another context, it could mean a toast at a celebration. Without understanding the context, you might misuse it and sound unnatural. Let's look at another example. Greetings. In informal situations, you might say, "Hey, what's up?" to a friend. But in a formal setting, like a job interview, you'd say, "Good morning. How are you today?" Again, it's not just about the words. It's about the tone, the formality, and the relationship between you and the person you're speaking to. Understanding these differences is a major step toward fluency. Context doesn't just involve language, it also involves culture. Language is deeply tied to cultural norms and values. For example, in the US, people tend to be more direct, while in the UK, conversations are more indirect and polite. If you don't understand these cultural nuances, you might misinterpret someone's meaning or accidentally come across as rude. Here's a quick cultural example. If someone in the US says, "I'll get back to you later," it usually means they'll follow up soon. In the UK, it might imply, "I'm not really interested in following up with you." These subtle differences in interpretation can completely change the meaning of a sentence, and that's why understanding context is so crucial. So, how do you develop this sense of context? It all comes down to exposure and immersion. The more you engage with real English, through movies, TV shows, podcasts, books, and conversations, the more you'll start to understand how context shapes language. When you listen to native speakers in different settings, you pick up on cultural norms, tone changes, and the subtle ways they adapt their language depending on the situation. For instance, think about watching a movie. The characters might speak casually using slang or idiomatic expressions that fit their situation. Compare that to reading a formal article or listening to a news broadcast. Those contexts require completely different tones and vocabulary. Exposing yourself to a variety of contexts allows you to recognize patterns and understand how language shifts depending on where it's used. But here's the key. Understanding context isn't just about listening and reading, it's about doing. You need to put yourself in situations where you're actively using English. Join an English-speaking club, participate in a language exchange, or strike up conversations with native speakers. When you use English in different settings, whether it's ordering food at a restaurant, making small talk with a colleague, or asking for directions, you'll see how language works in real situations. Over time, this will feel natural, and your confidence will grow. And don't worry about making mistakes. Context is something you learn by trial and error. Even if you say something a little awkward, it's part of the process. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with switching between formal and informal tones, adjusting your language to fit different situations, and speaking naturally. Fluency isn't about perfection, it's about progress and comfort. What's great about focusing on context is that it makes language learning practical and achievable. You're not just memorizing abstract concepts, you're preparing yourself for real-world conversations. And that's the true path to fluency. Learning how to use English in everyday situations and building the confidence to communicate with ease, no matter the context. To sum up, context is the secret ingredient to achieving fluency. It ties vocabulary, grammar, and cultural understanding together. When you focus on context, you're not just learning English, you're learning how to live in English. Now let's take this idea further and explore some practical ways to apply it to your learning journey. Stick with me, and we'll keep building on this foundation. Let's quickly recap. The secret ingredient for fluency is context. Understanding the context in which words and phrases are used makes you sound natural and fluent. It's not enough to memorize vocabulary or grammar rules. You need to know when, where, and how to use those words in different situations. The more you immerse yourself in English, Through real conversations and by paying attention to cultural and situational factors, the closer you'll get to true fluency. Fluency isn't about being perfect. It's not about knowing every word or never making a mistake. It's about the flow of conversation, the ability to adapt to different situations, and the confidence to communicate naturally. The next time you find yourself in a conversation, pay attention to the context. Ask yourself, what's being said? How is it being said? Why is it being said this way? These small observations will take your fluency to the next level. Now let's move on. I want to explore some specific ways you can apply this secret ingredient to your learning journey. I'll share some real-life scenarios that show how context works in practice. By the end of this, you'll have practical tips you can start using today to improve your English fluency. Let's start with a common situation. Meeting someone new. Think about how you introduce yourself depending on where you are. In a job interview, you might say, "It's a pleasure to meet you," with a formal tone. But if you're meeting someone at a party, you're more likely to say, "Hey, nice to meet you," or simply, "Hi, I'm Ryan." The difference isn't just in the words, it's in the tone, body language, and formality level. These adjustments are all part of understanding context. Here's another example. Asking for help. Imagine you're in a store and need assistance. In a casual setting like a small shop, you might say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" It's friendly and informal. But in a more formal setting like a high-end department store, you'd probably say, "Excuse me, could you please assist me with this?" The words, tone, and level of politeness change completely based on the situation. Next, consider ordering food at a restaurant. If you're at a fast food joint, you might say, "I'll have a burger, please." It's quick and casual, but at a fine dining restaurant, you'd likely say something like, "Could I please have the grilled salmon with a side of vegetables?" The formality increases to match the setting. The way you phrase your request shifts based on the environment, and being able to adapt your language in this way is a key part of fluency. Then there's making a complaint. Imagine you're staying at a hotel and there's an issue with your room. To a customer service representative, you might say something formal like, "Excuse me, I'm afraid there's a problem with my room. The air conditioning isn't working properly. Could you help me resolve this issue?" But if you're casually complaining to a friend, you might say, "Ugh, my room's so hot. The AC is broken again." Both are complaints, but one is formal and polite, while the other is casual and conversational. Context dictates how you phrase your thoughts. Even starting a conversation depends on context. At a party, you might break the ice with, "Hey, what do you think of the party?" It's light and casual. But at a professional event, like a business conference, you might say, "What line of work are you in?" or "How did you get started in your field?" The type of conversation shifts completely based on the setting and relationship. Tips for practicing context in everyday English. So, how can you start practicing context right now? Here are a few practical tips. Pay attention to the situation before speaking. Ask yourself, who am I talking to? Where am I? What's the tone of the conversation? Is it casual, formal, or somewhere in between? Thinking about these factors will help you decide how to phrase your sentences and choose the right words. Role play. Different scenarios. Imagine yourself in various situations, like ordering food, introducing yourself, or asking for help. Practice how you'd speak in a casual context versus a formal one. For example, try introducing yourself 3 ways: casually to a friend, politely to a coworker, and formally in a job interview. This exercise helps you get comfortable switching between tones and levels of formality. Listen actively. Pay attention to how native speakers adjust their language in different settings. Watch TV shows, movies, or YouTube videos and observe how characters change their tone and phrasing depending on the situation. For example, listen to how someone speaks at work versus at home. Notice the differences in tone, vocabulary, and sentence structure. Mimic native speakers. Mimic the way native speakers adapt their language. Pay attention to small details, how they start conversations, how they express politeness, and how they end interactions. For instance, a character in a movie might say, "Thanks so much, have a great day," at the end of a transaction, while someone in a casual setting might just say, "Thanks, bye." Immerse yourself in real-life English. Put yourself in situations where you need to use English. Join English-speaking groups, participate in language exchanges, or even chat with strangers online. The more real-world exposure you get, the easier it will be to pick up on context and adjust your language naturally. Learn cultural nuances. Language is deeply connected to culture. Understanding cultural differences will help you grasp context more effectively. For example, in the US, people are often direct in their communication, while in the UK, they might be more subtle and polite. Research these differences and observe how they shape the way people speak. Practice empathy. Think about the person you're speaking to. What might they expect based on their cultural background or the situation? Adjust your language to match their expectations. This will make your communication smoother and more natural. Why context is key to fluency. Context is what makes language come alive. It's not just about words and grammar. It's about knowing how to adapt your language to fit the situation. When you practice context, you're preparing yourself for real-world conversations, whether you're talking to a friend, ordering food, or participating in a business meeting. It's this adaptability that makes you truly fluent. So, here's your challenge. The next time you listen to English, pay close attention to the context. Ask yourself, what's being said? How's it being said? Why is it being said this way? Observe these patterns and try mimicking them in your own practice. And most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Context is something you learn by doing. Fluency in English is not just about knowing vocabulary and grammar. It's about understanding how language adapts to different contexts. How you speak to a friend is different from how you speak to your boss or a stranger. Recognizing these shifts and adjusting your language accordingly is key to sounding natural and fluent. Why context matters. Context shapes how we communicate. Whether you're at a formal meeting, ordering food, or chatting with friends, your tone, word choice, and level of formality change. Understanding these shifts helps you use language appropriately in various situations, making your communication feel authentic and natural. Strategies to master context. One of the best ways to improve is by actively listening to how native speakers adjust their language. Pay attention to the tone, pace, and word choice in different settings. This will help you understand what makes a conversation feel natural in various situations. For example, in a formal setting like a business meeting, the language will be polite and structured, while in casual conversation with friends, it will be more relaxed and informal. Another effective technique is shadowing. This involves mimicking what you hear, paying attention to the speaker's tone, intonation, and pace. Whether you're watching a TV show or listening to a podcast, repeating what you hear helps you internalize the rhythm and nuances of the language, allowing you to use it appropriately in real conversations. Role-playing real-life scenarios is also crucial. Practice adjusting your language based on the context. For example, introduce yourself formally for a job interview. "Good morning, it's a pleasure to meet you." And casually at a party, "Hey, nice to meet you." Simulating different situations helps you get comfortable switching between formal and informal language. Reading is another powerful tool. When you read, pay attention to how the language adapts based on the situation. For instance, business emails tend to use formal phrases like, "I would appreciate it if," while casual conversations in novels or TV shows use contractions and slang. Understanding these patterns will help you apply the right language in different settings. Asking for feedback from native speakers or teachers is also helpful. They can tell you if your language fits the context. Sometimes we unknowingly use language that's too formal or too casual, so feedback helps refine your communication style. Recording yourself speaking is another great practice. When you listen to your recordings, ask yourself if your tone and language choices fit the situation. Did you sound too formal in a casual conversation, or too casual in a formal setting? This self-reflection helps improve your ability to adapt your language naturally. Lastly, immersion is a key strategy. Surround yourself with English as much as possible by watching movies, listening to podcasts, or reading books. The more exposure you have, the easier it becomes to recognize how language shifts in different contexts, and the more naturally you'll start using it. Final thoughts. To sum up, fluency is not just about speaking correctly, it's about knowing how to adapt your language to fit different situations. By focusing on context, you can improve your ability to speak naturally and confidently. Practice listening, shadowing, role-playing, and reading with awareness. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're part of the learning process. The more you immerse yourself in the language, the closer you'll get to fluency. Keep practicing, and soon you'll be able to navigate any conversation with ease. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.